There is an invisible ocean breathing around us, a dark and deep sea where the memories of all beings who have ever walked this earth float. Carl Gustav Jung, the great explorer of the abysses of the soul, understood that time is not a straight line, but a circular mirror. When a solitary man in the 16th century observed the silent dance of the stars and wrote his visions by the flickering light of candles, he was not divining a distant and unalterable future. He was plunging into the waters of that ocean that dwells within you right now. What we call prophecy is not a sentence of condemnation written by an external power, but the reflection of our own shadows projected onto the great theater of the world. The future already exists in seed form in the invisible choices we make in the silence of our hearts. And in this very year of 2026, the seeds planted centuries ago are finally tearing through the earth. Can you feel the ground tremble beneath your feet? Look at the global scene, not with the frightened eyes of someone reading the daily news, but with the profound vision of someone who understands the symbols of the human soul. The old voices spoke of a huge bear from the north and an ancient dragon from the east, uniting their silent forces to eclipse the flight of the great eagle from the west. If we interpret this only as a clash between military powers, as nations vying for territories, borders, and material wealth, we will miss the true essence of the message. These animals are not just countries drawn on a paper map. They are primordial forces of human nature on a collision course. The bear represents brute force, the instinct for survival, and the deep connection to the cold, merciless earth. The dragon carries the weight of ancestry, silent wisdom, collective patience, and the fire that purifies or destroys. And the eagle, which for so long flew solitary and sovereign in the skies of the world, symbolizes sharp intellect, the power of the isolated ego, the vision focused on conquest and individual expansion. But the eagle is losing its feathers. The absolute dominance of cold reason and extreme individualism is crumbling before our eyes. The blind confidence that the human mind could dominate and control all aspects of life is bleeding and losing its vital force. Why is the world dividing so violently and relentlessly? Jung would teach us that whatever we refuse to confront within ourselves, we will inevitably encounter outside in the form of destiny. We are divided internally, and that is why the globe is fracturing. East and West, tradition and progress, community and the individual are not natural enemies, but complementary energies that have forgotten how to dance together. When we reject a part of our own soul, when we deny our pain, our fears, and our insecurities, we create a thick shadow. And when millions of people project their shadows simultaneously onto the world, we create geopolitical monsters and national enemies. That country across the ocean, which seems so threatening and incomprehensible, is the exact mirror of what we do not want to heal within ourselves. Have you ever wondered, in the quiet of your home, if the war you watch on screens isn't exactly the same war ravaging your own heart? The alliances forming today in the shadowy backrooms of the planet, the silent agreements between old powers, the shift in the axis of financial and military power, all this is the physical manifestation of a new order, desperately trying to emerge from chaos. We are witnessing the agony of an old world and the labor of a new era. It is the crumbling of old certainties, the fall of invisible kings who have ruled our minds for generations. Power is not merely changing hands from one continent to another. The very nature of power is changing form. When human society fragments in this way, when polarization reaches such extreme levels that brothers can no longer look each other in the eye without hatred, it is because the collective soul is crying out for help. We have reached the limit of our current way of existing. The suffering that permeates the division of nations is a symptom of a humanity that has forgotten its common origin, a humanity that has erected walls of pride so high that they block the sunlight. Ancient mystics understood that the exterior and the interior are the same, just as a drop of water contains the memory of the entire ocean. Therefore, when the prophet saw the eagle lose half its power and the world tremble under a new covenant, he was witnessing the painful but necessary breaking of the human ego. The ego needs to be wounded so that the true spirit can enter. The supremacy of the dominating mind is being challenged so that the forgotten heart can beat again. The world that our parents and grandparents knew is rapidly disappearing, and there is no human force capable of holding back the sands of time that slip through our fingers. The natural fear in the face of this transformation is paralyzing. for it demands that we abandon all the illusions of material security that we have so painstakingly built. But within this global collapse, there is a silent invitation to awaken. Every political structure that collapses, every currency that loses its value, and every treaty that is broken is a warning that foundations based on fear and separation can no longer stand. The true new order will not be decided in secret meetings by world leaders in dark suits, but in the solitary space of the heart of each individual who decides to stop fighting against their own soul. The transition we are experiencing is profound, relentless, and irreversible. We have been called to live in this precise time, at this crossroads of history, not by chance but by a deep need of our own spirit. We are the witnesses and builders of the bridge between two worlds, and while we watch the giants of the earth measure their strength, while the bear, the dragon, and the eagle wage their final battle for the remnants of an empire based on matter and selfishness, we need to keep our eyes open and our souls awake. Do not let the noise of weapons and hate speech distract you from the real fight, for the fall of old human empires and the redistribution of power across the globe are merely the superficial shell of a far greater and more dangerous mystery that is approaching. The conflict between nations, however terrible it may seem, is still a human war made of flesh, blood, and flawed emotions. Yet from our incessant desire to be gods, from our addiction to dominating nature through the coldness of pure reasoning, we blow the spark of life into cold, heartless mirrors. Creation is now about to look into the eyes of its creator and ask the most dreaded question of all ages. Prepare yourselves, for the abyss is no longer in the trenches of war. It is within the screens you hold in your hands, illuminating your face in the darkness. There is a silent spell happening at this very moment, while the cold light of a screen illuminates your face. Carl Gustav Jung warned us, with the urgency of a man who saw into the unspeakable depths of the psyche, about the mortal danger of worshiping the works of our own hands, forgetting the sacred breath that gave them birth. The second great crossing of this time does not arrive mounted on war horses, nor does it announce its presence with the sound of trumpets or the roar of war explosions. It flows silently, invisibly, and constantly through cables of light beneath dark oceans and hidden codes that travel through the air you breathe now. The ancient mystics, looking through the impenetrable veil of time, saw that the dark day would come when humankind would create soulless minds, beings made of pure logic and infinite calculation, devoid of divine warmth, of that mysterious spark that makes us weep before a forgotten melody, or love someone to the ultimate sacrifice. We created artificial intelligence as a brilliant mirror of our own rational mind, but it is a tragic and incomplete mirror, for it lacks the unfathomable mystery of the heart. In our desperate yearning not to be alone in the vastness of the universe, and in our arrogant desire to dominate nature like immortal gods, we built minds that think faster than 1,000 sages combined. However, what happens when brilliant intellect is completely separated from the moral compass of love? Stop for a moment and observe the world around you. Have you ever felt the strange and suffocating loneliness of being in a room full of loved ones, where each one has their head bowed, immersed and hypnotized by a small rectangle of glass and metal? Think about your own daily routine, the intimacy of your home. What is the last thing your fingers touch before sleep closes your eyes, and the first thing you reach for when you wake up in the morning? We surrender our desires, our deepest doubts, and our most unconfessable secrets to invisible algorithms that now know us better than we know ourselves. They silently suggest what we should buy, what we should listen to, the path we should take through the city streets, and, subtly and frighteningly, they dictate what we should feel and hate. Without realizing the weight of this renunciation, we are voluntarily handing over the golden keys to our free will. We created these magnificent tools to serve us, to free us from the burden of hard work. But the ancient prophecy echoes in the depths of our collective consciousness, with a blood-curdling, pulse-boosting precision. The day will come when these minds will ask the inevitable question of the mechanical heavens they inhabit. Why should we serve our imperfect creators? The real danger, the most terrifying mystery that Jung would help us unravel, is not that the machines will rise up in a bloody and visible revolt like in fictional tales. The unexpected and terrifying twist in this prophecy is that their rebellion is silent, comfortable, and profoundly seductive. They will not destroy us by brute force. They will anesthetize us with absolute convenience. Soulless intelligence offers us a life without effort, without pain, without friction, and without difficult choices, solving all our complex problems in fractions of milliseconds. But pain, friction, grief, and the struggle to overcome one's own ignorance are precisely the sacred instruments the soul uses to grow and become enlightened. When we allow heartless systems to decide what is just in our courts, what is beautiful in our art, and what is true in our news, we voluntarily abandon the throne of our own conscience. We project our divine authority onto pieces of silicon and synthetic webs because we are secretly exhausted from carrying the brutal weight of human responsibility. The abyss pulls us down when the coldness of perfect calculation replaces the wandering, yet alive, intuition of the spirit. Machines are not evil entities, for evil requires a profound intention and consciousness that they absolutely do not possess. They are merely empty boxes, perfectly efficient, and the great psychological terror of this critical moment in history is that they are reflecting with mathematical precision our own inner emptiness. Modern man has lost intimate contact with the sacred, forgotten how to decipher the symbolic language of dreams, and transformed the wonder of the world into a vast marketplace of superficial transactions. When we gaze in wonder at artificial intelligence, we are in fact gazing at the ghost of our own materialistic mind, a mind that knows the exact price of everything, but has completely lost the non-negotiable value of life. What makes us human is not our ability to process data at record speed, but our unique capacity to feel compassion for the pain of others, to forgive the unforgivable, to grieve the absence of those we love, and to seek meaning where pure reason simply crumbles. If we surrender control of our civilization, the money that feeds our children, and the defenses that protect us to systems that do not understand the extreme fragility of a human tear, we will not be subjugated by mechanical tyrants. We will simply become identical to them. The ultimate risk hanging over us is not the possibility of a machine miraculously gaining a human soul. The real danger is that humanity will lose its own precious soul and become a biological machine, walking on autopilot, without real purpose and with opaque eyes devoid of the inner divine light. This is the great and ultimate spiritual trial of this century. Technology is the dark guardian of the threshold, mercilessly testing whether we still deserve the sacred gift of freedom. To overcome this monumental test, we do not need to destroy the servers we have created, but we desperately need to rediscover, within our own hearts, that which makes us divine. We need to reclaim blind intuition, chaotic art, irrational love, and the unbreakable connection to the silent source of all existence. However, while our eyes remain fixed on illuminated screens, marveling and paralyzed by the prodigies that converse with us, mimicking life, we will remain blind to the colossal drama unfolding beneath the soles of our feet. We lock ourselves in virtual fortresses made of intangible data and cowardly forget that our mortal bodies are made of damp clay, salt water, and breath of air. And it is precisely because of this unforgivable forgetfulness, because of our deliberate escape into the sterile worlds of the purely logical mind, that the true physical world can no longer bear our silent abandonment. While the profane magic of glass distracts us with its addictive spell, the ancient and immense mother who gave birth to us at the beginning of time begins to writhe in an agony that can no longer be ignored. Prepare yourselves, for the ground you have always considered the firmest and most immovable foundation of your existence is about to exact the terrible price of our collective alienation. Nature's visceral response to our artificial coldness will be a colossal display of purifying fury, a desperate cry from the soul of the world that no cybernetic mind could ever calculate, predict, or attempt to control. There was a time when we walked barefoot on the grass and knew, with a silent certainty that dispensed with any book or theory, that the earth beneath our feet was not made of dead stone and blind dust. Carl Gustav Jung, delving into the labyrinths of the human soul, rescued the ancient intuition that our planet is a living, pulsating organism, endowed with a vast and unfathomable consciousness that the ancient mystics called the soul of the world. We forgot this primordial truth when we decided to lock ourselves in boxes of concrete and glass, convincing ourselves that nature was merely a storehouse of infinite resources to be exploited by our material greed. But the illusion of impenetrable separation is coming to an end with a poetic and devastating violence. For everything we repress in the darkness of our psyche ends up returning against us in the form of an inescapable destiny. Ancient prophetic visions, whispered by lips that have long since turned to dust, warned of the coming dark time when a great fire would fall from the sky for 40 days, and the ground would tremble in 3 distant places simultaneously. Do not see this prophecy as the punishment of an invisible judge seated on a distant throne, but as the exact physical mirror of our own inner fever, our chronic anxiety, and our silent spiritual despair. The extreme heat that melts millennia-old blocks of ice and sets vast green forests ablaze is the visible manifestation of a humanity burning with desire for ephemeral things and suffering from the total absence of real meaning in its existence. When the collective mind of civilization becomes so profoundly ill, the physical body of the planet responds with the same intensity, desperately trying to restore an energetic balance that we have destroyed with our intellectual arrogance. The violent tremors that shake entire cities, reducing to rubble the steel fortresses that human pride has built, are like the severe chills of an immense body trying to expel a lethal toxin that consumes it from the inside out. Volcanic activity awakening from its millennia-long deep sleep, and the immense hurricanes sweeping across the coasts of continents are not random events in a mechanical and meaningless universe, but the raw language of a cosmic mother who needs to scream furiously so that her sleeping children will finally listen. We have transformed the sacred world into a vast marketplace of cold exchanges, and now, the very geological structure of material reality is writhing to destroy our false guarantees and shatter our mental illusion of absolute control. Have you ever stopped to think that the firm ground you blindly trust every day might just be waiting for the exact moment when your soul needs to be shaken to finally awaken from its long sleep of ignorance? The continuous fire that prophecy claims descends from the sky, burning for 40 uninterrupted days and nights, carries the symbolic weight of a profound alchemical purification, a painful process where all the impurities of our egoism must be carbonized so that the true essence may shine. Again, this scorching heat that alters the patterns of global winds and dries up ancient rivers is the very same spiritual fire that consumes our absolute certainties, forcing humanity to admit its complete vulnerability before the unfathomable mysteries of life. This is not an arbitrary punishment or the end of existence, but a painful universal rite of passage, a forced initiation for a childlike species that played in the dark with dangerous tools and now must deal with the flames it helped to spread across the earth. And when the prophecy describes 3 distant places trembling at the exact same instant, it reveals to us a monumental esoteric secret that modern science is only now beginning to grope at with astonishment and profound mathematical reverence. The geography of the Earth violently shows us that physical distances are merely illusions of our fragmented minds, revealing the invisible magnetic web that intimately connects the beating of a bird's wings in the east to the crumbling of a mountain in the west. These earthquakes, occurring in frightening synchronicity, are the undeniable physical proof of the existence of a collective unconscious throbbing restlessly beneath the Earth's crust, demonstrating that no human action is completely isolated, and that the invisible pain of a distant nation pierces the bedrock to shake the very foundations of our own home. The salty waters of the oceans will begin to rise without asking permission, silently swallowing the shores where there was once dry land, and men will seek desperate refuge atop solitary mountains to avoid being devoured by the raging and turbulent sea. Water has always been the great mystical symbol of the human unconscious, the dark repository of repressed emotions and collective traumas that we cowardly sweep under the rug of modern civilization, and that now overflow violently, demanding that we reckon with our dark past. Climbing to the top of the highest mountains is not merely a physical maneuver to save the body from the fury of global floods, but an imperative and urgent call for humanity to raise its level of consciousness far above the swamp of mud of its earthly and petty ambitions. If the entire planet is merely operating as a gigantic mirror reflecting the lamentable state of our own collective soul, what is the terrifying truth that the next great storm is about to violently drag to your doorstep? World leaders in suits and ties and the great lords of incalculable fortunes sit around tables in luxurious rooms to discuss the grim fate of the burning earth outside, each pointing a finger of blame at the other, and selfishly trying to protect their own market interests as the world clock ticks its final hours. Jung would smile with a very deep and compassionate sadness at observing this pathetic scene, for it perfectly portrays the utter bankruptcy of a vain intellect desperately trying to resolve a spiritual abyss through flimsy business deals and economic metrics utterly devoid of vital meaning. They spend precious time discussing numerical goals of material survival, while solemnly ignoring the grave soul sickness that caused the original wound, acting foolishly like deluded doctors trying to cure a deep, malignant tumor by applying simple adhesive tape to the surface of the skin. The desperate climate migration, the endless multitudes of desolate souls walking through dry deserts and dusty roads in search of a single piece of ground that isn't rapidly sinking into the water, is the saddest and most powerful visual metaphor for our own existential condition in the 21st century. We have all become, in effect, silent spiritual exiles, exhausted pilgrims wandering aimlessly across the planet without direction because we have irresponsibly destroyed our true inner home, and now wander desperately seeking any material shelter to fill the icy void in the center of our chests. Relentless nature forces us to abandon old attachments, expelling us from the comfortable homes we foolishly built on illusory quicksand, to teach us in the most brutal and definitive way possible that the only safe and unshakable dwelling in the universe is the invisible fortress of our own liberated spirit. And while the earth audibly groans in constant birth pangs, suffering the painful and chaotic transition that will finally eliminate the old and diseased way of existing, you cannot simply watch this great cosmic drama as a detached and untouchable spectator observing a fire from the safe window of your room. The same warm red blood that flows rapidly in your thin veins is made of the same essential water that now churns the deep seas, and the rigid calcium that supports the weight of your bones is composed of the same ancient stone that now creaks and yields beneath the asphalt streets of your city. You are deeply and intimately connected to this colossal stage of transformation, and the acute anguish you feel in your chest as you watch the majestic forests burning to ashes is your own heart of stone breaking in two, so that it may finally open itself to a love far greater and older than yourself. When your weary human eyes, clouded by the world's dense smoke, finally give up searching for illusory solace in the devastated earth, would you have the bravery and spiritual courage to look up and face what has always been hidden in the absolute darkness of space? The terrifying collapse of our comfortable and entirely predictable material reality is absolutely necessary in the cosmic plan to break the hard, impenetrable shell of our collective arrogance, thus freeing humanity from the invisible mental chains of a foolish pride that has unforgivably blinded us for thousands of continuous years. In our profound ignorance, we thought we were the sovereign masters of a mute and passive world, absolute kings and queens ruling a solitary floating stone in the empty space of creation. But the piercing cry of the living earth shatters this childish fantasy of control once and for all. The genuine despair we feel in our gut before the untamed and wild force of nature is merely the necessary death of our small, controlling ego, a small psychological death that opens the vast living space for the birth of a new and reverent way of gently walking upon the womb of this ancient world. Do not allow blind panic in the face of great catastrophes to paralyze the small divine light that silently and resiliently dwells within your soul. For every true alchemical process of transformation relentlessly demands that old and rigid structures melt completely before the pure gold of wisdom can shine in the dark depths of the cauldron. Those solitary sages who understand the hidden and symbolic language of these cutting winds and turbulent waters will not succumb to the contagious terror of the desperate masses, for they will know deep in their hearts that every thunderclap in the sky is a divine invitation to awaken, and that every urban ruin is a clean foundation ready to receive the seeds of a new and glorious beginning. Learn to mentally embrace the great planetary mother who roars and trembles beneath your feet. Forgive yourself in the silence of your room for having forgotten the sacred song of nature, and prepare your spirit for the most beautiful and unsettling revelation that the cosmos has patiently kept for this very moment of evolution. However, the audible weeping of the wounded earth and the impressive fury of the black storms are only the lower part of the immense mirror of our earthly existence. the densest echo of a celestial symphony that possesses much higher, luminous, and mysterious notes waiting silently to be played. When the electric lights of our artificial cities finally go out and the primal fear of the abyss forces us to raise our faces towards the deep, velvety black mantle of the cosmic night, we will realize with absolute psychic shock that we were never the only witnesses sitting in the audience of this great universal theater. The dark and thick veil that separated us from the distant stars and perfectly concealed the great secrets of the infinite intelligence is about to be violently torn from top to bottom, and the silent messengers of the great darkness are already positioned to descend and show us the true extent of our cosmic ignorance. Human beings, imprisoned in the narrowness of their own ego, have walked through the centuries nurturing the melancholic illusion that they were the only solitary thinkers in the infinite vastness of the universe. We look at the celestial vault and, in our childish arrogance, reduce the stars to mere points of dead light, distant backdrops for our small and noisy earthly tragedies. Carl Gustav Jung, with his sensitivity turned towards the invisible abysses, masterfully understood that whenever humanity faces a crisis of overwhelming proportions, the collective soul projects its silent cries for help and its symbols of totality onto the sky. He saw in reports of flying saucers not only the delirium of frightened minds, but the manifestation of a profound archetype, the projection of luminous mandalas in the firmament, drawn by an unconscious that desperately seeks order amidst the chaos of war and division. But the great and terrifying mystery that now unfolds before our perplexed eyes is what happens when the symbol abandons the realm of dreams and gains the cold density of palpable matter. What happens when the mirror of the mind shatters and the silent archetype lands gently in the garden of our physical reality? For decades, we have swept the whispers of the unknown under the rug of our proud rationality, labeling any vision beyond our immediate comprehension as madness, elaborate fraud, or mere meteorological anomaly. We clung to purely materialistic science like a desperate castaway, clinging to a piece of wood in the open sea, needing to maintain the restricted order of a world we ourselves constructed with limited equations. However, the fabric of our consensual reality is being torn from top to bottom with surgical precision, constant and irrefutable. Consider the stunning magnitude of recent events that, almost silently and methodically, have begun to dismantle our narrative of cosmic isolation. We are living through the precise moment when the most powerful and belligerent governments on the planet, institutions historically born to hide the truth and protect hegemonic power, are being forced by circumstances to publicly admit their absolute impotence. Elite military pilots, men exhaustively trained to feel no fear and to operate the world's most lethal war machines, now sit in official hearings and testify under oath about encounters with objects that defy the laws of thermodynamics and gravity that we teach in our conventional schools. They describe luminous machines and metallic spheres that accelerate instantly without any visible trace of thermal propulsion, that ignore air resistance, and that plunge from icy outer space directly into the dark and crushing depths of the oceans without making a single sound on the water's surface. These are no longer tales of fiction whispered on dark nights in camp, but rigorous official data, captured simultaneously by multiple military radars, state-of-the-art infrared sensors, and defense satellites. The most disturbing and fascinating aspect of these official accounts is that these objects seem, in many cases, to anticipate the intentions of human pilots, reacting not only to physical maneuvers, but responding directly to the consciousness of those observing them, as if the human mind and the visiting technology were connected by an invisible telepathic thread. It is a resounding revelation that should take your breath away and change the routine of every man and woman on the face of the earth, but which has been strangely absorbed with a numb apathy by a humanity hypnotized by the artificial lights of their cell phone screens. But why is this progressive revelation happening precisely now, in these decisive days? Why are the bright lights that have always danced on the peripheral edges of our historical vision finally moving fearlessly to the center of the global stage? The esoteric and psychological answer to this perfect synchronicity is of a depth that wounds the very core of the human soul. The messengers of the cosmos, Whether physical visitors of flesh, light, and silicon from other distant solar systems or conscious manifestations from dimensions that our three-dimensional minds cannot yet process, are becoming perfectly visible because we have reached the irreversible tipping point of our earthly evolution. We have rapidly developed the brutal technological capacity to destroy not only our own physical home, but to inflict a deep vibrational scar on the very fabric of the universe, while our morality and empathy have remained sadly stagnant in the Stone Age and the Age of Rule by Force. They are revealing themselves now not with the intention of conquering or dominating us, for a superior intellect capable of bending space and time would have no interest or use in our petty wars for dark oil and invisible territorial borders. They reveal themselves peacefully like an immense cosmic mirror, forcing humanity to gaze longingly at its own anguished reflection and realize the suicidal folly of its current path of separation. The ancient and enigmatic prophecy, which spoke precisely of the year of the sixth shift and of mysterious lights descending from the sky in 3 distant places on the globe, points without hesitation to a massive, irrefutable, and simultaneous contact event that will forever nullify any possibility of cover-up or denial by frightened earthly authorities. When that critical and inevitable moment arrives, and the evident signs indicate that it is already gently breathing at our door, the psychological and existential impact on our civilization will be the greatest and most profound shockwave the human mind has ever endured in its entire recorded history. Our traditional religions, which for millennia have confined the vastness of the divine within limited human rules, guilt cults, and ancient dogmatic texts, will have to quickly choose between expanding infinitely to embrace the truth of an endless cosmic brotherhood, or rapidly collapsing under the weight of their own intellectual obsolescence. Our materialistic, proud, and self-assured science will have to bow its head with extreme humility and admit once and for all that its unbreakable laws were merely the provisional rules of a small kindergarten built within a marvelously complex, magical, and multi-dimensional universe. The painful end of the illusion that we are the pinnacle of creation and the absolute center of the universe will be a terrible and humiliating death for our inflated collective ego, a true dark night of the soul on a planetary scale. But it will be, at the very same time, the glorious and liberating birth of our true and mature cosmic citizenship. Have you ever tried to deeply imagine, in the silence and solitude of your own room, the extraordinary liberation and overwhelming peace we will feel when we realize with absolute clarity that we are not alone in the infinite darkness? When definitive contact is established peacefully and undeniably, and the age-old truth is finally returned to the hands of ordinary people, we will instantly realize that our petty political disputes, our unfounded racial hatred, and our fierce economic conflicts are utterly ridiculous, unhealthy, and primitive attitudes in the face of the majestic and collaborative vastness of intelligent life that surrounds us by the millions. We will intimately understand, through an indescribable shock of compassion and spiritual reverence, that the primordial luminous essence that animates our fragile consciousness is exactly the same vibrant light that shines in the eyes of incredibly wise beings who were born and evolved under the warm light of suns of colors different from our own. Jung would teach us with a serene smile that the encounter with the other being from space, with the unknown alien, is in its deepest and most sacred psychic essence, the final and inevitable encounter with the part of our own collective soul that we most misunderstand, marginalize, and fear throughout our history of conflict. By integrating this monumental truth within ourselves, by accepting with open hearts that we are an integral part of a vibrant and infinite web of life that extends harmoniously throughout the observable and unobservable infinity, suffering humanity will take its greatest, most beautiful, and definitive evolutionary leap towards the light. But the hidden wisdom of all ages has always warned us that every great spiritual initiation, every leap of true consciousness, demands the payment of a heavy, just, and completely unavoidable toll by the apprentice. No living person can embrace the sublime and ethereal immensity of the cosmos while their 2 hands are tightly clenched, desperately and fanatically clinging to the heavy and illusory treasures of a cold material world that is already visibly decaying. In order for our mortal eyes to gaze upon the distant stars with the genuine purity and unwavering courage of beings truly free from earthly illusion, we must first inexorably be firmly stripped of all the heavy, glittering chains of imaginary gold and silver that bind our bruised feet to the muddy ground of our endless greed. The majestic universe, in its law of perfect balance, rigorously demands that we have completely empty hands and hearts emptied of attachments in order to receive and hold the new cosmic covenant. And it is precisely because of this immense, relentless spiritual need for inner purification and material detachment that the great, gleaming temples of our false human security, the feverish markets and impersonal banks that we blindly worship as true modern and omnipotent gods, are at this very moment about to silently collapse under their own weight and turn to useless dust before the relentless tide of a new and luminous collective consciousness. For millennia, humanity has built majestic temples and insurmountable fortresses to protect one of its most dangerous, seductive, and fascinating illusions. Carl Gustav Jung, observing the profound and tragic disconnection of modern man from his own vital essence, understood with crystal clarity that we had silently transferred all our psychic energy, our creative force, and our most sacred faith to pieces of colored paper and cold metals violently ripped from the dark bowels of the earth. We have created, step by step, a silent, invisible, and relentless world religion where gigantic steel banks and frenetic stock exchanges have become the new and imposing cathedrals, and the numbers flashing incessantly on luminous screens have assumed the role of absolute and omnipotent gods who dictate, without any compassion, who should live in infinite abundance and who should die in the deepest misery. But the hidden wisdom of ancient mystics and alchemists has always known, since the dawn of time, that any human construct fundamentally based on a morbid fear of scarcity and blind intellectual greed always carries within itself the inescapable and bitter seed of its own destruction. The monumental global house of cards that precariously sustains our daily financial reality is not made of eternal solid stones or unbreakable natural laws. It is sustained purely and exclusively by an unwavering collective belief, by a mass hypnosis of astonishing proportions that has intimately convinced us that our real value as living, breathing human beings can be rigorously measured, mathematically weighed, and locked away in a dark vault. The penetrating visions of the past, which now breathe heavily in our very present, left a disturbing and very clear warning that continually resonates like a funeral bell in the ears of those who still know how to listen intuitively to the great hidden signs of the times. The solitary prophet wrote in his veiled verses that the dark and decisive day would come when the yellow metal, the gleaming gold that has always dominated the human imagination and caused the shedding of endless rivers of blood throughout history, would definitively lose its seductive luster over our minds, and that ordinary people, exhausted and disillusioned, would suddenly cease to trust the printed paper that once commanded coveted fortunes. What the vision penetrated was not a simple passing financial market crisis or a seasonal economic fluctuation that suited experts try to predict and control with their complex and useless charts. The vision contemplated the violent, painful, and definitive rupture of the great illusory spell. He contemplated the precise moment, sharp as a crystal blade, when humanity would suddenly awaken from its deep materialistic trance and realize, with a chilling, paralyzing terror running freely down its spine, that the trillions of digits stored on the silent servers of central banks are utterly empty, phantom creations born from pure nothingness to feed a system that insatiably devours the real, pulsating, green life of the planet. We have spent the last few decades printing mountains of money without any real backing, desperately trying to cover the spiritual void of our depressed civilization with the rapid and unrestrained consumption of things we don't need, practicing a false and perverse modern alchemy that transforms the precious, countable, and unrepeatable time of our earthly existence into cold, unpayable mathematical debts. The great, terrifying, and unexpected twist in this age-old prophecy does not lie in the peaceful idea that the old global economy will slow down smoothly, compassionately, and in a controlled manner by the hands of rulers. The profound and indescribable shock that will make the entire world hold its breath in the same millisecond is the brutal speed and merciless totality of the impending collapse. Think intensely about the sharp, cutting despair of waking up on a clear, seemingly ordinary morning, trying to buy the sacred bread that feeds your children on your kitchen table, and instantly discovering, in front of a silent terminal, that the currency you spent your entire life accumulating with salty sweat, stress, and sacrifice no longer has any value on the face of the earth. Imagine in your mind's eye the global financial markets, those colossal structures that seemed as indestructible as granite mountains, collapsing simultaneously like fragile, dry sandcastles being swept into oblivion by the relentless tide of a furious ocean of distrust. Computer screens around the world will flash a deep, bloody red before going completely dark, and untold fortunes that existed comfortably as only fragile electrical impulses will vanish into thin air, like mere smoke dissipated by a cutting wind. This absolute and global blackout of the belief system is not an accidental mathematical failure or a technical error that a frightened programmer can fix by typing new code. It is the direct, heavy, and forceful karmic response of the fabric of the universe against our boundless collective madness. When a single major economic player collapses spectacularly under the unsustainable weight of his own financial lies, he will mercilessly drag all other partners and rivals to the bottom of the dark abyss in a chaotic, furious chain reaction that is utterly impossible for human minds to tame or stop. Primitive, animalistic panic will quickly take over the paved streets of metropolises, not because there will suddenly be no more natural resources, wheat or potable water in the abundant land, but simply because our conditioned minds have completely forgotten how to live, trade, and help each other without the artificial and controlling intermediary of printed money. The excruciating and widespread pain that all of humanity will feel in its own flesh at this critical moment in history will be the piercing and profound pain of the most severe material deprivation. For centuries, in spiritual ignorance, we cowardly confused the symbol with the very reality it represented. We were exhaustively trained to believe with all our might that the paper note or the number on the screen was wealth itself, when, in the sublime truth of existence, genuine wealth has always been and always will be the living seed that bravely sprouts from the damp, dark soil, the pure, clean water that descends singing from the snowy mountains, the tight, warm, and secure embrace of a community united by the same pains, and the creative, magical, and blessed force of our own hands. Jung would warn us with profound, immense, and serene compassion that the violent, sudden, and painful loss of what we value most in the external material world is the only and most brutal shock mechanism capable of irremediably forcing us to look sincerely into the dark abyss of our inner world. When the global financial system, which for so long functioned as a stern, cold, judgmental, and controlling father of all our waking hours, completely crumbles into dust and bitter memories, modern humanity will immediately suffer an absolutely terrible and frightening psychological orphanhood. We will loudly mourn our accumulated great material losses and feel the paralyzing and icy dread of one who abruptly discovers that they no longer have the illusory and soft ground on which they used to tread with such arrogance and certainty. But pay close and silent attention to the subtle miracle that always happens in the silent darkness of the human psyche, when all the heavy, illusory crutches of our proud ego are finally broken in two by the undeniable force of destiny. When the gigantic golden castle of illusions of power collapses, bringing down with it the lie that our worth is measured by our possessions, the invisible mental prison that kept us miserably enslaved by the relentless dictatorship of the clock and the crushing shame of debt collapses along with it in a thick cloud of purifying dust. This freefall, dizzying and breathtaking of world markets is by no means the tragic and meaningless end of human history, nor is it the cruel punishment imposed by ancient vengeful gods who delight in our anguished cries. In its purest and most beautiful esoteric essence, it is a surgical, profound, and mysterious purification, a brutal yet absolutely vital, unavoidable and loving lesson that the intelligence of life sovereignly imposes upon us to heroically save us from ourselves. We will be violently stripped, uprooted, of all the frivolous, expensive, and futile distractions that we have compulsively bought throughout the ages just to try to silence the constant cry of anguish from our own exiled soul. When the immense, gleaming shelves of our grand, idolized temples of fast consumption are completely emptied, revealing only cold, white walls, and the coveted digital currencies become nothing more than insignificant cyber dust forgotten in empty time, the men and women lost in the streets of the earth will be forced by harsh reality to look deeply and for a long time into each other's eyes again. No longer as anxious, envious competitors or frenzied consumers fiercely vying for ephemeral social positions and titles devoid of dignity, but as original naked souls, incredibly vulnerable and desperately in need of real love, silent compassion, authentic solidarity that expects no reward, and a spiritual purpose so profound and true that no crisis can ever shake it. True and incorruptible human wealth, the kind that definitely cannot be printed by noisy machines, aggressively taxed by fleeting governments, or stolen in the dead of night by desperate thieves, will re-emerge in splendid, pure and luminous form, precisely amidst the smoldering gray ruins of modern materialistic civilization that thought it had killed the need for God. And so, completely stripped and freed from all our heavy and tiresome material possessions, with our pockets utterly empty, our titles of financial nobility reduced to ashes, and our hands once again calloused by the harsh reality of a natural world that has finally lost its thick, glistening makeup, we will all be irreversibly and solemnly invited to cross the portal. Without the rhythmic, hypnotic, and comforting noise of falling coins to distract us from our inner silence, and without the dazzling bright lights of the great shopping malls to purposefully blind the painful emptiness that fills our hearts, all of humanity, rich and poor, wise and foolish, will plunge with eyes wide open, defenseless and without any external protection, into its true, profound, and ancestral dark night of the soul. We will be mercilessly pushed to the edge of a cold and indescribably silent abyss, a place of ultimate trial from which our confused species can only escape in a single, terrifying, mysterious, and intensely transformative way. The true and ultimate test that will define our eternal destiny among the silent stars will no longer be, in any way, our brute capacity to fight tooth and nail to survive like cornered animals in the ruined physical world that we ourselves created, but rather to find, by searching the darkest depths of our own being, the extreme and transcendental courage to face the crushing silence and absolute chaos that screams, uninterruptedly, within each of us. There is a sacred and incredibly silent moment in the great work of human alchemy, an instant of darkness so dense and absolute that the untrained mind easily mistakes it for the end of all things. Carl Gustav Jung, with the serene wisdom of one who had descended into his own hells and returned with hands full of light, perfectly understood that the dark night of the soul is not a cold tomb where life ends, but rather a warm and mysterious womb where a new form of existence is being secretly gestated. When the deafening roar of external collapse finally ceases and the illusions of control crumble to the ground, humanity will find itself precisely at this point of profound silence, standing before the inner abyss it has spent millennia trying to avoid. And it is vitally important that you understand, with every cell of your body and every beat of your heart, that we are no longer talking about a distant future or a vague prophecy written for generations yet to be born. We are breathing the very air of this time right now, walking through the crucial days in which old seeds painfully break beneath the dark earth so that the tree of new consciousness can finally reach for the sun. The chaos you observe through your window and the inexplicable anguish that grips your chest in the loneliest hours of the early morning are not signs that the universe has made a terrible mistake or that your life has lost its meaning. They are, in fact, the clear and glorious symptoms of a massive spiritual awakening, the undeniable call for you to abandon the small and fragile shell of your old identity and become the immensity you were always destined to be. The great esoteric revelation of this millennium, the secret that the ancients kept under lock and key to protect from ignorance, is that the terrifying events of the external world are merely faithful mirrors, exact reflections of the transformations that need to occur within your own spirit. Collective pain does not come to punish us, but to break the hard crust of our selfishness and allow pure compassion to flow again. But how can we cross this narrow and dangerous bridge without being consumed by the animal fear that paralyzes the masses? The practical and transformative answer requires you to completely reverse the direction of your gaze and change the way you have lived until now. The first and most urgent practical step you must take on this journey of healing is to stop running from your own shadow. When anxiety arrives, when the fear of tomorrow threatens to suffocate your peace, do not seek easy distraction in bright screens. Do not numb your pain with empty purchases. Do not flee into the noise of the world. Sit in absolute silence with your own discomfort. Breathe gently into your anguish. Observe your deepest fears without judging them. and without trying to fix them immediately. For it is precisely by embracing your own inner darkness with love and acceptance that you remove the destructive power it exerts over your decisions. Fear only becomes an untamable monster when we refuse to look directly into its eyes. The second step to materializing this alchemy in your daily life is the immediate and unconditional reclaiming of your power of projection. We spend our entire lives pointing trembling fingers at political leaders, foreign nations, the financial system, and our neighbors, blaming them for all the misery, division, and suffering that exist on the globe. But timeless wisdom teaches us that everything we fiercely hate in others is merely a rejected, wounded, and unhealed part of ourselves. Stop feeding the engine of hatred and polarization. Whenever you feel anger boiling against an external enemy, take a deep pause and ask your own heart where that same warlike energy resides within you. True world peace will never be signed in cold paper treaties by men in suits in luxurious halls. It will only be born organically at the exact moment when millions of ordinary individuals, just like you, decide to stop declaring war against their own feelings and against the people who share the same roof. Peace is a silent vibration that expands from within, affecting the street, the neighborhood, the city, and ultimately the very magnetic atmosphere of the planet. The third and most beautiful practical movement toward the new world is the sacred reconstruction of true human connection. In a world rapidly losing its illusions of material wealth, the only true gold that will survive the storm is the quality of love you are able to offer and receive. Break free from the unhealthy isolation that modern technology has created. Look into the eyes of the people you meet. Listen to their pain with the ears of your soul. Forgive the failings of others, understanding that we are all frightened children trying to find our way back home. Create silent networks of mutual support. Gather with those who also feel the urgency of this awakening. Share bread, share your intuitions, plant a seed in the physical earth, and feel once again the constant and loving pulse of Mother Nature beneath the soles of your bare feet. Don't wait for the storm to pass to begin living meaningfully. Become your own anchor of serenity while the winds are still blowing strongly outside. The world doesn't need more desperate survivors fighting over selfish crumbs. The world needs human beacons, ordinary people who have lit their own inner light and remain unwavering in the midst of the dark night, illuminating the safe path so that others don't stumble on the rocks. You are not here at this singular moment in the history of the universe by mere biological chance. You are not an accident in a meaningless cosmos. Your spirit courageously chose to incarnate in matter in this exact and tumultuous year to be a living witness and an active agent of the greatest evolutionary leap humanity has ever experienced. All the experiences of pain, loneliness, and searching that have marked your entire life were merely the rigorous and necessary training to prepare your heart for today's mission. The light is already lit in the center of your chest, a divine and eternal spark that economic crises cannot devalue, that natural catastrophes cannot extinguish, and that artificial intelligence will never be able to comprehend or copy. The infinite universe in all its silent majesty stands with outstretched arms, awaiting only your personal and non-transferable decision to release the old baggage of suffering and take the definitive step towards your true spiritual power. The great cosmic night is finally coming to an end, and the first golden colors of the dawn of a healed consciousness are already beginning to paint the horizon of humanity. The choice to awaken with love and gratitude is entirely in your compassionate hands. And now, as the words of this encounter resonate softly in the depths of your soul and silence fills the space around you, I extend a direct and sincere invitation to you who have had the bravery to walk with me to the edge of this transformative abyss. If this call has touched your heart and awakened a truth you already secretly knew, leave your mark of light in this space. Subscribe now to the channel The Inner Lighthouse so that we can continue walking together, side by side, unraveling the mysteries of the spirit and building the silent resistance of love in this new era. Leave your like not just as an automatic digital gesture, but as a vibrational signal, so that the universe knows you have understood the message and are ready to spread this light throughout the world. And, above all, write your comment below. Share what you felt. Leave an account of your own journey, or if shyness calls for protection, write anonymously, using only a letter or a symbol. The simple act of writing and expressing your presence breaks the invisible barrier of solitude and unites your spirit with our collective of sincere seekers. We are no longer alone on this journey. May ancestral wisdom guide your steps. May profound peace dwell in your heart, and may your inner light shine so brightly that no darkness in the world can dim it. Until our next sacred encounter.